Good afternoon everyone, my name is Ross McGill. I'm your host for eTeachers webinar, the proactive approach to teacher recruitment. I just want to go through the process of this webinar, how you can get involved, introduce our panel members, our objectives for today, and then kind of set in terms of the context of some headlines that you're all too familiar with. So if I could just start with how you can get involved. If you use the hashtag on Twitter and Facebook, Talking Schools Jobs, and if you want to send in your questions, we already have a number of questions that we're going to answer from our viewers. But if you want to send any questions through the session, you can email those to pressoffice@eteach.com. If I just introduce the people around the table who are with me, to my left, I have Paul Howes, who's a former teacher. He's the Chief Executive of eTeach. Hello, good afternoon, Paul. I have Anne Hudson, the HR Director at Woodward Academies Trust. Hello, Anne.
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you for coming. And I have Michael Keeley, who's the Head Teacher at Cardinal Wiseman School. Good afternoon. If I could just remind the viewers of our objectives that we'd like to talk you through in the next hour. Our first objective is to consider how schools can have an all-year-round approach to recruitment. And moving into our second part of the objective later in the webinar, how you can create your own talent pool. And then looking at how we can make small changes, particularly what fascinates me is how we can reduce the number of questions on application forms to enhance the recruitment process and your application numbers. And another one that particularly interests me is how you can use social media to enhance your school's reputation. And then probably going to be picking from Anne's thoughts quite a lot here on how you can stand out from the crowd in terms of an employer brand. So those are our objectives. I'm just going to move into set the context and give you some headlines. Despite £700 million being spent by the DfE on recruitment, we're still missing our teacher training targets for the last 5 years. Alongside this, pupil numbers are due to rise in 2024, particularly in secondary schools, by over 20%. And then we just need to mention retention. With a high workload and low teacher morale, already things are very, very tough for schools, particularly with funding cuts. So with all this in mind, I'm going to start with my first question, which I'm going to offer to Michael. How are you facing and how are you dealing with these challenges as a head teacher?
With all schools, we're facing budget cuts and increased costs, and at the same time as this, we're competing with schools for a reducing talent pool of teachers, so the timing isn't great. Mm-hmm. So where are these teachers going to come from, which is what we're going to discuss today, and when they do come for interview, etc., what actions can I take as a head teacher to get them into my school with that shrunken pool of teachers? And it's a worry moving forward, and the actions around each year, we start each year, what provision can we afford this year? It may not be the same as last year because costs have risen. Mm-hmm. And then you plan from there and you make decisions, and some of those are painful. Mm-hmm. And we all have to face them.
And if I can bring you in from an HR point of view, any immediate thoughts on the current issues?
I think the issue is really important. I think recruitment and retention were important. Mike talked about workload and morale. So as well as being innovative with our recruitment approaches, I think we need to really pay attention to why teachers are leaving and work with those teachers and with our academy teams and school teams to change some of the issues and concerns around recruitment so that our schools are places people really want to work and they don't feel burned out and exhausted by being with us, and that is really important.
Okay.
So
Paul, your thoughts, immediate issues, the recruitment crisis that we have?
I think the recruitment crisis has shown that the process of recruitment in schools has been ignored and sometimes hasn't had enough priority, and that's both at school level and at government level. I think the reaction we're seeing at the moment across schools, and I know Michael's schools, and I know how Anne works, and we can see how they work. Where there are proactive leaders, those schools are having less problems. So I think it's a time when schools have to widen the net, have to use other strategies, use more strategies, and actually think a bit more laterally about recruitment.
Okay, so that, I mean, that takes us nicely into our second question. Just remind viewers, hashtag Talking Schools Jobs, email your questions to pressoffice@eteach.com. So moving into our first objective in helping you consider an all year round approach to recruitment. We're all very familiar with peak periods, you know, September, half terms, all those different term times where teachers come and go. But I'm going to bring in Paul here and ask Paul what strategies can be employed to build up a teacher pipeline rather than waiting for when your vacancies appear. So what would be your thoughts?
Yes, we're seeing, again, historically, the process was very reactive. I've had a resignation, I need to go and find somebody. In the current market, that's going to be difficult, and we are advocating a much wider approach to recruitment and a recruitment strategy that's for 365 days a year. Building effective career platforms, making sure that websites will interest potential candidates who can come at any time through the school website, not necessarily waiting for that advert to work.
That resignation, yeah. And from a multi-academy trust point of view, what strategies have you?
Well, I think we always work fairly early on our curriculum and staffing plan. That's really important, so that by January you know what it is you need. The academies are large, so there is some potential to approach recruitment on a rolling approach. So let's take science, technology, English, maths, STEM subjects, advertising for those posts through our school recruiter platform, but having a rolling approach to recruitment. So if we see good people, interviewing them, talking to them, sometimes recruiting more than you think you need at that time, because you know by September you need more people. So it's about building that talent
within the
pool.
MAT, is there a capacity to, you know, if people are willing to be moved around different schools within the brand?
That's one of the things that MATs can do. In our own MAT, we're south-based and northern-based, so we have to work within hubs. Some MATs are much more geographically close, and what you've described is a lot easier. But one of the things you can do is, and I want to do with our academies, is if you've interviewed and found a good teacher in one academy and you don't have posts for them all, then how do you share that talent through a talent pool with the rest of the schools within your cluster and within your MAT? Okay. So it's about having a whole MAT approach to recruitment and not just an individual school.
Can I bring in Michael here as a standalone school?
Yes.
What challenges are you facing, you know, in terms of considering an all year round approach?
We have two busy phases. We have a model that works for us, whereby we hire in February and March. We find that that's when student teachers are looking for their first jobs, and we make sure that all the vacancies that we think we're going to have are filled. Then in May and June, unfortunately, life's like this, colleagues get promotions, etc. We know there are 5 or 6 teachers who'll get jobs elsewhere in May and June, and we plan for that. And how we plan is through the following. If it's a TLR job, we'll advertise it. If it's a main scale job, we'll contact eTeach and our agencies. Generally speaking now, we operate a system where we'll bring in 5 long-term agency teachers. What we've found in the past is that the talent pool in June isn't great, and therefore if we make a hire on a long-term basis, that could be a problem moving forward. And then you've got the HR and the capacity being sucked from the school to possibly support a teacher that isn't at the level you require. Whereas if you go through an agency, you can have the same process without the HR complications. And that's how we operate on a yearly basis.
Paul, is there any strategies you could recommend? You know, you've got a standalone school, you've got MATs with, you know, very different demographics, you know, more resources to pull upon.
I think my school is standalone, but it's part of a group. It's part of a diocese group, and I don't know in your case how much collaborative work goes on. But we're working with that group to see if we can build a group talent pool. So that we can be constantly attracting teachers into that pool that all of the schools in the area could use. and that not only does that share resources, it shares cost, because it's possible then to provide a bigger attraction point for those teachers, because they're looking at possibly 20, 30, 40 jobs, which means you're more likely to have the attention of the job browsers.
Yeah. What challenges does the MAT face, looking at this all year round approach? There must be some difficulties.
I think there are difficulties. It's sometimes around individual principals and their approaches to recruitment, and whether or not they want to work with everybody in the MAT really effectively. Mostly they do, but sometimes that can be a difficulty. And then sometimes there is difficulty in the whole process of suggesting that teacher A might like to go and work in a different place. There's just a view. Teachers tend to, even now, apply for schools rather than trusts. So I think there's quite a lot of work that multi-academy trusts need to do to help applicants get the perception
if they apply to a MAT, they have
of what they got.
Maybe a greater opportunity.
But we can offer more in terms of CPD, our own leadership development programme, our talent programme. So I think we have to balance what we do as individual schools and academies within the MAT with what the MAT-wide offer is.
Okay, thank you. So just to remind viewers, #TalkingSchoolsJob, email your questions to pressoffice@eteach.com. I'm going to just mention our first question that was submitted prior to the webinar, and this is talking about NQTs. We've had a question from Michelle, who's a PA to an executive head teacher, and Michelle asks, how can we cost effectively encourage NQTs from a job poor area to move to a job rich area? For example, move from the north of England to the southeast, where the southeast is crying out for NQTs, but we just can't seem to get them in our school. So that's Michelle's question. Anyone want to offer some thoughts?
Well, I think one of the issues is obviously we've recently dealt with a situation like this where we're trying to move teachers from Wales up to West London, and they are terrified mainly because of the costs involved. And the salaries means that they are going to struggle. They're going to struggle to live in West London under their own means. So I think schools have to realistically, particularly if they're moving from job rich to job poor area, the economic, socioeconomic aspect of that is the total opposite. Their money's not going to go as far. So I think schools have to do more to offer relocation help and incentives for people to move up.
And there's a government responsibility, I think, too, with housing and reduced rents. Michael?
It's catch-22. I mean, we don't have the funding to offer those kind of incentives.
Yeah.
And the truth is, all I can offer really is you've probably got career progression opportunities in London that you wouldn't have in an area in the north. That may not be the case. I don't know areas in the north. But in London, I know it's fast moving. It's an exciting environment, London schools. And that's what we can offer. And that can be attractive to young graduates. But in the end, it will be about cost and rent. And if the government's serious about recruiting teachers, they've got to give teachers a pay rise.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah, thank you. Anne?
I was thinking similar with NQTs and overseas trained teachers. When you bring those colleagues in and they've moved country, it's around what help you can do to help with housing, help with living. Can the academy?
That your MAT currently does?
We have done with overseas trained teachers,
Okay.
and what we have done there is, helps with accommodation, found rented accommodation that a number of overseas trained teachers or NQTs could share.
Does that generally have a fairly good
that could
success
be
rate?
fairly helpful, fairly good.
Okay.
Always, there's, I think, when people move out of young people move out of their area where they're comfortable, you just need to be aware that they're not just coping with a new job and the challenges of being an NQT. If you've come from the north in a small village, life in London is exciting, but also can be a bit challenging. So it's about how you help in a more rounded way.
Okay, thank you.
We see lots of examples of schools and groups of schools who are addressing this in different ways. Some are offering support with this, and we're seeing that schools in Bristol are paying for people to cross the Severn Bridge every day and paying toll fees, which works out at a few £100s a year, and that might seem a small amount, but it works and it gets people to make that journey, albeit 25 miles. In London, I agree with Mike. I think the local government, the government, the people who are perhaps suggesting fantastic strategies are not addressing the real issue. Teachers can't afford to move into London. Can you imagine having a young family and trying to get accommodation and move to a young family on a mainstream teacher's salary?
Yeah,
It's
well,
difficult.
pay freeze for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Something needs to happen if we want to try and help and fix this recruitment crisis. So thank you, Michelle, for that question. We're going to move on to our second objective now, which is to enhance your recruitment process, looking at online advertising, online applications and targeting advertising. I'm going to bring Anne in shortly. So schools must adhere to certain processes when it comes to how they recruit. Paper records can have benefits, equally they can have the negative effects as well. So I'm going to ask Anne, in terms of your multi-academy trust, the online applications, how has that improved processes, for example?
Well, I think the whole online application and applicant management process has really, really helped us. What I did with our academy was introduce this so that all of our academies had a consistent approach and the candidate had the same experience. And what we found, particularly when we moved to the embedded online application questions through the school recruiter application, is that our number of applications increased. And I think for several reasons, people more and more now want to use their mobile device to start their application process. They can answer questions rather than filling in typical form.
If I think of all the applications I've
Yeah.
completed for a teacher application form, downloading it as a Word document, trying to get the text to fit a box is
All of that.
extremely off-putting. So are you in the kind of drop-down field checkbox?
It's absolutely,
Okay.
it's embedded in, so it'll ask you for some basic data about yourself and then more data about your experience.
And I guess the benefit from an analytical kind of, you can analyse the data behind the scenes.
You
to a
can see
degree.
the data, you can see the applicants coming in. The system enables you to communicate with the applicant as they progress. So thank you, we noticed you've started your application and we're looking forward to hearing from you. You can, if you've got a closing date on that applicant, you can, application on that job, you can contact the applicant and just say, you've got
automated emails.
2 days before
Yeah.
the closing date. So are you,
Right.
looking forward to hearing from you?
Thank you. Michael, what does your school use at the moment?
We use the traditional methods. However, we're talking to Paul and E-Teach at the moment. I mean, they've pointed out our application form is 21 pages. And we've looked at that, and he showed us the data that it was off-putting for candidates. They'd look at it and not complete it. So we've maintained the content but cut it in half, and we're moving forward. I see powerful incentives coming through Twitter, Facebook. We're not using those platforms, but I'm certain that we will in the next year or two.
I'm fascinated by this, the data about 30 questions and how it can improve the number of applicants. What's your experience?
Well, we've been looking at some time, and I'm trying to measure which adverts perform best, which adverts across the range of subjects, not even considering whether they're severe shortages like maths and science. But if you look at the adverts that perform best and the schools that get the most applications, they are the ones with the best processes, regardless of what the subject is.
So what would the best one look like?
It would be a very short application form, which is mobile, which means that something like 30 to 40% of our traffic at the moment is via mobile. Most schools still won't allow teachers to apply by mobile, which means they're disregarding maybe 300,000 visitors.
Okay,
and that's a huge number. So it's the single biggest factor. And our question is why, at a time when we're already facing teacher shortages, do schools already still make it too hard to apply for the jobs?
So there's your first kind of golden nugget there. Mobilisation, online applications, don't alienate yourself.
Minimise. You'd really just, at the first phase, you really just want an expression of interest from these candidates. And in the old days, we used to throw the work out to the candidate, make them do all the work. Let's fill 21 pages of forms. Really, what we really want is, I want to know who you are, and we will make the decision whether we want you to work for us, and then we'll do the work, because I think that will get better results.
Yeah, okay. Just remind viewers, #TalkingSchoolsJob. Please email your questions. We'll try and answer them here live at pressoffice@eteach.com. We're going to move into our third objective, which is about enhancing and boosting adverts, and lots of different strategies you can do, particularly with hard to fill roles. There's particularly, in my experience, your physics, maths, those typical roles, very difficult, particularly in, working in London. I'm sure it's much more challenging in other areas of the country. So Anne, can I just bring you in from a multi-academy trust point of view, with probably a much wider talent pool coming in? What challenges do you still face in particular areas?
Well, we still have problems with the STEM subjects.
Okay.
Some of our academies are on the south coast,
Yeah.
and one of the problems with the south coast is that half of the circle around the academy is the sea, so you've got a smaller pool,
Right.
local pool to draw
Okay.
from. But I think what we are trying to do with these subjects is a sort of multifaceted strategy, using our talent pools really effectively. So if Academy A gets some great science teachers and has only 2 posts, then within the talent pool, let's share the data about the good candidates with the rest of the Academy Trust. That's an important piece. And also how we target, think very carefully about our advertising and the various media that we use for those posts. So it may be eTeach, it may be some other job boards, also social media and Twitter. And really being intentional about the Twitter. So let's ask the head of department to use Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn to contact the community of people who are involved and interested in maths, similarly with science. So those are all ways to really kind of target people who'd be interested.
We'll come to employer brand later, but I'm assuming within a multi-academy trust you've got your Facebook page, perhaps Twitter feeds.
We do, and we're doing that centrally as well. So somebody in our office is pushing out around the trust and through all of our followers the opportunities. So that's something we're doing increasingly, and it's being effective.
Okay, and Michael, looking at hard to fill roles again, what are you finding hard to recruit in West London?
Well, it's always going to be the STEM subjects. Our own way of dealing with this is we bring in students from the local university's PGCE courses. They come in for a day, they spend a day in the school. We think when they come in, they'll love it, and they do. And over the last 3 years, we've been able to recruit purely off of those days where we've had those students in. So we've been very lucky.
Well, I think we've seen a time, I mentioned at the start, where it's been quite one-dimensional recruitment in schools. Largely, most schools used to place their ads in one place. That approach doesn't work anymore. Nowadays, you have to spread the net as widely as possible. Social media is pretty much free, apart from some time and effort, to get your information, your messages on there. There are a range of job boards that will suit certain types of teacher. I use the example of an FE college we work with that insists most of their roles goes into the farmers' media. They're an agricultural college, so why wouldn't it? And so we all have to be flexible and thinking, if we're looking at science teachers, are we looking at the science publications, the science networks, the maths groups? And until recently, I don't think schools have been thinking that laterally.
And, eTeach did a survey of over 550. Could you give us any insight into the headlines from that survey, what the data is?
Of the schools or the teachers?
The eTeach survey of the 550 candidates.
I think most of them complained about the onerous application processes. They found it really difficult to apply for most jobs, and most of them these days give up before the end of the process.
So in terms of targeting, where you've got problems with the same job or the same kind of role, what strategies have you both deployed?
Well, I'm certainly with STEM subjects, again, this whole business of really inviting NQTs before they have jobs into your academy for work experience. If you're a training school, that helps as well. So linking with the ITT providers is really, really good strategy.
If I can, think of that job where you haven't filled that vacancy and you've got to go a second time and spend more money.
Okay.
Give me a specific example on how you've dealt with that problem.
From time to time, we've turned to headhunters to try and target those people who are not thinking that they want to. So they're soft applicants, they don't think that they want to apply, but they might. And you can work with a range of different organisations to do that. That's really helpful.
And the cost implications?
There is a cost implication there, but of course it is, you need to know upfront what that is, but it's a percentage. And we have done that, for example, for our senior leadership positions and our principal positions really effectively, working with a recruitment partner. That doesn't mean to say that we're not using other media as well, and but that has enhanced, and that's been worthwhile.
Thank you. And Michael, we go back to the STEM subjects where you might have struggled in the past. When it hasn't worked, what next have you done?
Well, it hasn't not worked yet.
Yeah.
When it doesn't work, I mean, we'll have a look at, are we paying the rate that's going to attract a candidate? In the end, would we have to attach a TLR to that post? But we would go to seek advice from Paul at that point.
So you get some data from eTeach and some guidance?
Absolutely, and because he's helped us in the past, we've had problems.
Yeah,
you talked about TLR. The other thing is think about your pay policy,
Yes.
recruitment and retention allowances. Just that use them effectively. It might be for a year or two, but you know, you've got freedom to do that, and that's very much something that we also encourage our academies to do.
So interesting, because you're using social media, you're not quite there yet. How have you used this free software to attract people to your trust?
Well, we've done it through LinkedIn posts, through Twitter, through telling people we've got a great vacancy, you know, come and have a look at this job, linking it to our recruitment website so that all the information about the role is there. One of our principals has also been quite innovative in that he's encouraged staff to refer a friend. So
Right.
do you know
Nice
somebody?
idea, yeah.
And giving you know, some kind of reward.
And do you
or
have some data that
incentive.
says they might have applied through Twitter rather than through the typical avenue?
Trying to work out all the data. The school recruiter system does produce data, and that's helpful, but sometimes you can't necessarily break it all down. So what we do now is also ask the candidates that come through shortlisting and interview to tell us how they came to the job, so that we collect the data at the end as well. So that's not a process, it's a question that we ask our candidates.
Okay, I was just going to mention...
It's an interesting question about data on this, because the data we have tells us that at any one time, approximately only 25% of the workforce might be on the move, might be looking to move jobs. Yet, far more than that is needed to fill the jobs that we've got vacant at any one time. So then we get into the conversation about passive candidates and active candidates. The active candidates are the people who will be looking at adverts. The passive candidates are the people that are going to be attracted by the networks they belong to, whether it's groups on Facebook, groups on Twitter, groups on eTeach, groups on any other media, really, any media. You could attract those passive candidates to look at your job, and at that time they probably don't even know they're looking for a job. It's at that time that you have to convince them that your school, your group are worth looking at. And the messages that go out through Twitter do that, because usually it's by other teachers saying, it's great working here, you know, you should try it. And
I mean,
those
with the
are
power of
messages.
social media, people can post videos and all sorts of things, but there's a statistic here, Paul. eTeach sees a typical advert seen by around 400 teachers, but that would increase to about 800 if used for social media. So what advice would you give Michael here, who's probably just doing traditional paper-based, maybe website vacancies on his school website? What would be your next recommendation?
I think the recommendation would be, let's look at the wider opportunities to promote your vacancies for little or no cost.
Yeah. I mean, I use Twitter quite actively. I know in the past when I've considered a promotion for a particular idea, that it's something simple as £5 pins your Twitter feed more often higher up than everyone else's as they scroll through their phone or the website. So it's, you know, it's a very small cost. So we're coming to the second half of our webinar now. Just remind viewers, hashtag Talking Schools Job. Please follow the hashtag on Twitter and Facebook. Keep up the conversation. Send your questions to pressoffice@eteach.com. We're going to go into employer brand. Now, particularly what's fascinating for me is that every school wants the best for their kids. They want their teachers there to do the right thing and to enjoy working there. So that's a given. But how do we stand out from the crowd? So Anne, I'm going to bring you in here in terms of employer brand. You've got a large number of schools. You were talking before we started the webinar about the why. Could you give us a bit of insight here?
Well, I think it's important in your brand, in your material, on your website, try and connect with why people would want to work with children and young people, why they'd want to work in your particular school. Rather than just focus on what you have to offer, try and connect emotionally with the applicant. And that really is about getting
So can
into...
I have some ideas, some practical ideas?
Right, so why would you want to work here? It may be around passion for young people. It may be about wanting to make a difference. It may well be around, you know, what somebody values in terms of teaching and learning, but it has to be more than we're a great school and we've got a good Ofsted and that kind of generality. It needs to come right the way through. It's great to have some staff quotes. You know, let's hear from teachers who are already in the school saying
and
something
you do this
positive.
with videos, little marketing videos?
We have done that, and some of our academies have got little videos about themselves and about teachers in their academies.
And how do you encourage your staff to be proactive on social media? Is there a policy or
there isn't a policy against it. We do. I mean, we encourage positive news stories about educational things, about what pupils have done in an appropriate way. And I think it's something else that helps build the brand is how interesting things that teachers and the academy, the individual academies are doing affect education. So, you know, let's go back to science. If somebody's writing an article and posting it on a science blog, then that's the kind of thing that sort of engages candidates with more than just there's a vacancy.
Yeah, or a bit of text. Paul, in your experience receiving thousands and thousands of adverts through eTeach, what for you stands out from the crowd as a good example of, you know, employer brand and attracting lots of clicks?
I think the movement from a simple text advert, which is, you know, geography vacancy starts September, to vibrant career pages, the ability for teachers to and support staff for that matter to click into the school website so they can see what it looks like. Most of them will immediately, they're interested in a school, will go and hunt down the website. Most school websites are primarily built to impress the parents and maybe Ofsted. They're not really focused on the casual job seekers. And we advise all of our customers to realise that you will have somebody looking at your school website that might be a parent, but they might also be a candidate for a job. And they might not know that, and you might not know that, but there must be a signpost on that website to say, if you're interested in working here, here's some information. So many people forget to do that. So we make sure that that's on our clients' websites, and we drive people towards that. One of the funny features I look at every year is how many people are looking at teaching jobs on eteach.com on Christmas Day.
Right.
And there's always a few hundred. And I'm amazed, you know, and it's year after year after year.
On the couch on the,
well, they've had enough of turkey and they're lying there with nothing to do.
Michael, what current processes do you use in terms of your brand?
Well, in terms of our brand, I mean, we were upgrading the website. I was talking with Paul earlier on, and I still believe that the most powerful communication is word of mouth. And you know, we're confident if we get people to our school, once they come in for an interview or a date, they'll want to come back again and stay. But we're not capitalising on that. And if you take it full circle, well, word of mouth now is really, it's okay for them to go and say what a wonderful school yours is, but we're not capitalising on Facebook and Twitter.
It's a video clip. It's a video clip
and
on your Facebook, a video clip on your website, and it does the job.
And that's the way forward.
Yeah.
So at present, do you have videos on your site?
We've got a promotional video on the school website. You're welcome to look at it. But we can't afford to keep updating it. And the way forward will be Twitter and.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, we spent a bit of money on a drone and did something flashy, and we had a lot of people through our Twitter channels want to come and at least look at the school and end up getting a job because of social media. So it's evidence that it does work and it is for free. I just want to remind viewers, hashtag #TalkingSchoolsJob, please email your questions to pressoffice@eteach.com. I just want to bring in a quote here. The top 3 things teachers look for when applying for a vacancy, according to eTeach survey of the 550 teachers, is the school career site, so the website, a workload policy, and a fair workload policy, I'll stress here, and information about progression opportunities. So therefore, employer brand should maybe demonstrate all those things. So again, coming back to you, Paul, where have you seen this really successful, and particularly at this survey that you've conducted?
Most recently, we're seeing groups of schools, the Nottingham group, who've got a fair workforce policy published as part of their advertising, as part of their message on their websites, and that's working.
And can I ask what that would say?
It's quite a detailed
Yeah,
document,
no, I'm sure.
But it just talks
data.
about marking hours, and it talks about a sensible workload, particularly for young teachers and new teachers who are coming into the profession.
Anne, your experience here, enticing people in, what would kind of be the top 3 things that you would want people to want to apply?
Well, I think we want to be
Matt.
talking about the opportunities for professional development and training. We're going to be launching a leadership development programme. All of our academies offer really good CPD opportunities and promotional opportunities, and then you can widen that out in terms of opportunities within the trust, not just within one particular school. So those are good messages to include. And workload and well-being, employee engagement, all of those things are really,
teacher mental
really
health,
important. So we would be talking about that. And again, we don't have a fair workload policy as such, but making sure that our workload and the expectations on teachers are reasonable and manageable is something that's really important to us.
So I'm going to bring Paul in. So for viewers watching who might have just a static website, who might still use Word applications, in terms of costs, Paul, from an eTeach expertise, how could schools revamp their website, the cost implication? How could they revamp their job processes to entice more applicants?
Well, the beauty of...
What kind of things could the school do with yourself, for example?
The beauty of the eTeach product is we sell that as a suite of tools, and it comes pretty much free with the advertising model. So we give career pages, we give tools for schools to be able to do the recruitment better, to run their advertising better, and we do that at the best cost we possibly can.
And could you give us a ballpark figure, if, in case of Michael's school here, we've just got the website and a video. How could I, get best value for money, attract more people to want to look at my school? In Michael's case, he's got no social media channels established yet. We know those are for free, but bringing in some expertise.
Yeah, for us as a customer, we will be, and we are already working with Michael to build that profile online to help them utilise the free channels. All the free channels. It's not just social media.
Yeah.
There are free job boards.
Yes.
There are free websites out there. For example, when you buy a model from eTeach, we're not saying put all your eggs in one basket. There's an advert, let it run. We're saying let's spread the net as widely as we can. Let's use all the free media channels we can. Social is very much one of those, and will become more important as we go on, as people get more used to it. But interestingly, there's an awful lot of free job channels out there. How does a young person look for a job these days, by the way? They're probably more likely to go to a search engine and say, I want to teach maths in Scunthorpe. They're not going to go necessarily to my brand or any other brands. They're going to go and say, maths in Scunthorpe. So that means we have to engage with search engines. Yeah. A lot of school adverts aren't built or don't have the tags to do that. No. We do that. We can do that for them.
So for people watching, we'll get into a bit of technicalities here, but it's, search engine optimization, keywords. So if that person does type in, I want to be a maths teacher in Scunthorpe, if you have those keywords on your website, then the chances are you'll be on the top first page of a search engine. Okay, so reminder, talking schools jobs, the hashtag, please send your questions through the press office at eteach.com. I'm going to move into restructuring, and I'm going to bring Michael in here now. Cardinal Wiseman, Michael, you want to explain the reasons why, but we know there's a huge funding crisis. Schools are working in very tougher climate than they've ever known before. What immediate thoughts come to mind?
Well, immediate thoughts come to mind at 2009-10, when it was clear that there would be a change of government, and we knew what was coming, and we were generously funded. We knew that would change, and we knew we had to make plans for that. We did our first restructure then, and we've done 3 more since, and around them, where you face a situation where you either go into deficit or you reduce some of the provision you're offering. What we've found through the 4 occasions is you need to make that decision as early as possible, because the longer you leave it, painful though it is, it will become more painful if it's drawn out, and also will be more costly. So as we've gone into each of the restructuring processes, we've done it honestly, we have consulted honestly, we've had the unions in, etc., but we've done it early, and that's allowed people to understand what's coming. It's not been welcomed, but I know in the end that the actions we've taken have neutralised some of the pain.
Yeah.
It's never going to be painless.
No, it's not, and it's and I'm sure you're not the only school out there. Certainly, in my experience.
What I would say the key is to have HR support.
Yeah.
All the way through the process. There aren't many schools who've got their own.
Yeah, so
the academy may have.
Yeah, so Anne,
we didn't
your
have.
perspective here on funding and how it affects the impact on recruitment and then possibly restructuring.
Right, well,
What's your
funding
experience?
is challenging, and all of our academies have found it challenging. And we've had to do the type of thing that Michael describes at various times. So it is about doing your curriculum plan and your staffing plan early, so that you do know what you're needing, and that you start early in your consultation process. But it's also that is about, as you go through that process, it gives the opportunities for teachers who may have to be made redundant to look for other jobs. The other thing I would say in a multi-academy trust is, redeployment needs to be really an important part of the conversation. And when you're in a trust, you've got opportunities to redeploy people around your
as a
academy
MAT, what
trust.
challenges have you faced with funding cuts?
Exactly the same
Exactly
challenges
the same.
as any other school. The funding is exactly the same. We've got southern academies with smaller funds because the capita per pupil is smaller in the south than it is in our northern academies. So one of the things we're interested in is when the fair funding actually rolls out, and that we have a more consistent funding across all our academies. So it has meant we've had to reduce numbers of teachers and also look at staffing levels in other parts of the academy
I guess
well.
one benefit is that you have got that pool where you can offer at least a distribution to a degree. Has that worked?
Distribution of funds, you mean?
Of staff,
staff.
who might face redundancy.
So yes, within the hubs. I mean, obviously it's got to be reasonable and the jobs have to be there, but the school recruiter platform and the fact that all the school websites come together in one Woodard Academy Trust website means that there's visibility of all our vacancies. So one of the things we talk about is mitigating the impact of redundancy, and then we're able to make available those jobs that we've got in other academies to those staff who may be at risk.
Paul, from an eTeach perspective, are you seeing an increase in perhaps people that are facing redundancy due to funding? Is there a change in person's circumstances or people coming to the eTeach website?
We're not seeing an increase of people coming to the site to look for jobs, and even though we're seeing the other end of the scale, people leaving the profession, it doesn't necessarily mean they stay in teaching, which itself is adding to the shortage. We know that's one of our biggest problems, and usually it's the more mobile people who've got good degrees who can probably move quicker and easier into other professions. So it's a real dangerous area. I think Anne's right in saying it's not just about recruitment, it is retention. Yeah,
so I think of retention for schools or customers that have used eTeach, let's say before and after a kind of funding crisis or a decrease in funds. Where are the good stories of schools that might have utilised eTeach in the past and they're still with you today? And what's the success story there, or the strategies that they've used amidst all the changing goalposts?
Yeah, I think we see that larger school groups, we're talking to one locally, where 3 or 4 schools have come together and their funding at the same time hasn't increased, it's actually gone down. We see a lot of movement between the schools, and those schools for us will be looking less to bring in outside teachers, but to use the teachers they've got within to fill the roles if they're available. But it hasn't meant a slowdown, not for us anyway. We're
Right.
still seeing those schools, even schools who are large skits, still advertise outside of their own teacher training environment for teachers, because they can't actually dictate who's going to leave, and they can't always dictate who's going to join and join their teacher training program. So the numbers don't perfectly match, and recruitment never perfectly matches. The day we'll have 100 maths teachers walk through our website door is probably going to be the lowest demand for maths teachers on that day. It's just the law that tends to happen.
Yeah.
It's never perfect.
Okay, thank you. We've talked a lot about recruitment. Let's talk about retention. What ideas do we have to keep our staff? Is there a cost implication to that too, and what's a good example?
I think there's a cost implication, and it's not a simplistic piece. Some of our academies do, really helpful things. They have extra days off because they do more twilight in the evenings, so that they do some what I call feel nice things. So it might be about time off, it might be about ice creams in the summer, just things that make people feel good. So that's one level. But what we're doing is a survey into employee engagement, looking at workload, in well-being. It's about the job design, it's about communication, it's about leadership. So all of what this survey will do is give us a real good picture of where people are, and what are the things that we're then going to plan to do to retain people. I think it is more than just workload, although I think that teacher unions in particular feel that that's one of the big issues. Many professions work hard, but what we need to do is be really supportive to our teachers and ensure that the job is doable.
Have you seen, so looking at the school census that just come out, there's been a rise in part-time teachers. Have you noticed any changes in habits of teachers?
Well, certainly, I think we
reason?
have to be smarter about how we work with part-time teachers. It can be fantastic, but you can have challenges with curriculum if you have a large number of part-time teachers. And I think one of the things we have to face up as a profession is how we make teaching more flexible. We've also got the challenge of people working longer. Pensions have changed, so teachers should be staying in the profession longer. So we need to make jobs and design jobs so that people can sustain being a teacher for a lot longer. And that's where workload fits in. What about career breaks? What about sabbaticals for teachers? What about really good, significant professional development? And I mean more than a twilight event, something that's substantial. So all of those things feed into retention, but there's no quick win at all to that.
Paul, I'm going to ask you in a moment what the great incentives that you've seen through job adverts. But firstly, Michael, what retention, where's your success stories? That member of staff that stayed 10 years, what would be the reasons how you've held on to them?
Well, firstly, in terms of retention, I'd say it'd be very easy if the government gave us some more money.
Yeah.
I mean, if we paid them more, they would stay.
Of course,
It's as simple as that. They're not going to, so how can we get our staff to stay at the school? Firstly, it's got to be a work-life balance, and we've become data obsessed, I think, schools over the last 5 years. And I think if schools can focus on the teaching and learning before the data, I think that's important. And I think teachers value that if they feel that that's the school's ethos. I think colleagues need to feel valued, and one way in which you can value them is to ensure that they get good quality professional development, as Anne said. And then there are small things that you can do to show your appreciation. My hands are tied financially, but the one thing I can do, and it does bring goodwill to staff and bring the community together, is every Friday we offer a breakfast. It's a cooked breakfast and a coffee, or cereals and fruit and a coffee, and it's for £1. And there'll be 50 or 60 teachers come down together on Friday mornings. And it's that building a sense of community, because teachers aren't paid as much as they should be. Therefore, there's got to be something more in it for them. And I think it's our duty to provide that, whether it's through relationships, professional development, all the little things we can do to
absolutely.
help.
Sounds a lovely idea. So, Paul, what adverts have you seen that have enticed, in terms of a well-being approach, more applicants to a particular job? Is there anything that stands out?
There are a number of different strategies employed by a number of schools, but it really does depend where you are. Surprisingly, in an area that doesn't suffer from teacher shortages, they incentivise financially to get leaders to move to Pembrokeshire, for example. I know schools are incentivising them and paying above the normal salary rates for people to relocate. We see this from international schools all the time. International schools will offer tax-free salaries with free accommodation. And those schools don't have a problem recruiting, or very little problems recruiting. So there's, as extrinsic as it might seem, you know, the financial rewards are important. The reason I moved to London as a young teacher was because I saw London as the place where I could get fast progression through the profession. I was told if you want to move quickly through the profession, you want to become a head of department, you want to become a school leader, London's the best place to get that experience quickly. That these days isn't enough because we've got a reward. We talked about, I think Anne mentioned that, yes, in other professions, I have a niece as a doctor, a young doctor. I'm amazed at the hours she works, but the rewards are totally different. You know, the workload has to be matched by the rewards, and in teaching it's way out of kilter.
Okay, thank you. So to viewers again, we're going to come into the final session. We're going to just answer a few more questions and summarise the webinar. Reminder, hashtag #TalkingSchoolJobs. Email your questions, pressoffice@eteach.com. I've got an HR question for you, Anne, here. So this is from Shona, who's an HR manager. Information about pros and cons for different methods of assessment of candidates. Could you give us some insight from your point of view?
Well, I think one of the very effective methods of assessment for teachers, but also satisfies teachers' opportunity to see your school in action, is to invite them into school and allow them to teach a lesson, observe, and get some data from that lesson, some observation. So that's a very good assessment. Sometimes you'll want to ask people to present something or talk about some technical aspect, particularly if it's science or maths, maybe share some information and material about that. For senior leadership jobs, I normally include some psychometric assessments as well, so we can actually really understand the behaviours and the drivers for that person, and then talk to the candidates about the data that they've produced. Now, I wouldn't do that for all jobs, but certainly for senior leadership jobs, that's an important part of assessment.
Okay, and Michael, your HR team at your school, what are the processes you use? Maybe one or two things that don't work, things that might be not very cost effective.
I think that through the process we'll use the same tools as any other school, psychometric tests, lesson observations, data exercises, etc., etc., etc. But depending on the role, when we're interviewing for a main scale teacher, what we want to see is passion for their subject and enthusiasm. If that's there, we'll look very carefully. Normally you get that through the person specification as well. We see that as very important for younger teachers. Everything else we can develop.
Yeah.
If that enthusiasm and knowledge of subject is there, we'll develop the rest. When you're moving forward to a more experienced colleagues, an AHT role, for example, we're looking for something different. What we need to see is the knowledge and skills. And will that colleague be able to walk into a room full of grizzled middle leaders and hold their own? And what we find is we'll do all the normal things, but it's normally the formal interview, funny enough, the very old-fashioned one, which finds them out in terms of skills and experience. Because very often we get teachers who are quite young and their CVs look wonderful, but there's no record of having changed or turned something and sustained it. And that's what you want to see. If someone's going to have influencing credibility on more experienced staff, that's what you need to see. And that normally comes out through the interview when you're asking them questions about, well, in that situation, what did you do?
Yeah, and the relationships, conversations can attract people to want to work in the school. Paul, before I bring in a question from one of our viewers, so this is from Nathan, who's a recruitment and talent manager. How does eTeach aim to ensure its technology is up to date with industry and its candidates? So what are you doing?
We are constantly monitoring, watching, looking for best practice. usually outside of our space, outside of our sector. We're currently reviewing the school recruiter product that we launched this year. We've already got Generation 3 on the workbench.
Right.
That's due to be released in January. The new mobile application suite is coming along at that time of year as well. So we're constantly looking at what's out there, and we want to get the best to our users, really.
Okay. I'm just going to take a question from our viewer, Siobhan. So Siobhan asks what long-term actions should be taken to encourage candidates to enter the teaching profession. So, Michael, what are your thoughts on this? How can we entice people to stay longer?
Well, I think we've covered most of those areas.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to pay teachers more. You know, this is a government that lives by the market, but it doesn't seem to apply to nurses and teachers.
Yeah.
That has to change. It has to change. Other than that, it's about making them feel loved and valued.
Yes.
And we're doing the best we can with the resources we have.
And would you say the same, Anne, within the trust?
I would, but I think the viewer wanted to know about encouraging people to enter the profession.
Yes.
And one of the things I think is really important is to encourage, let's talk to our sixth formers about career in education. Let's provide opportunities for people when they're thinking about careers to visit schools, to see what a teaching career could be like, because it can be fantastic. And we know that because we see so many passionate people and people who really, really enjoy their job despite the challenges of teaching. So I think there's some work we can do with people thinking about their career to introduce them to the career and give them opportunities to see and feel.
Paul, any thoughts on bringing
Yes, I've got some thoughts. I mean, we for a long time ran a blog, an open blog, or we had regular comments from teachers, and I think one of the things we notice is there is a tendency to moan online about their lot, and I think sometimes we have to, yes, we understand it's a tough job, but we have to realise that the more moaning and that we do, the more we're putting young people off, and we have to look at the positives of the job, because let's face it, I love my job as a teacher. I loved it, and I think I had the best job in the world as a young PE teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And literally, that's what I tell people I talk to. If you want to be a millionaire, it's not for you, but it's a great job.
Okay, so you want to...
Just we had maths teachers in from a college yesterday, and I did talk to them, and there has to be something, as I said earlier, more than the financial. And what I said to them was this, and it's true what you just said, Paul. When you get it right with a class or some students who you don't think are going to come through and make the progress that they're supposed to, when they do it and you're responsible for that, it's the best job in the world. It really is. Best job in the world.
No, it is. I'm going to take one more question from Twitter. So this is at 621 Carly. So Carly, thank you for your question, and the question is: traditional interviews don't necessarily result in appointing the right person. So have we got any other ideas?
Well, I think, what do we mean by traditional interview? I think it needs to be more than asking questions. You really need to understand people's attitude and behaviours, and just going through a range of scripted questions may not get the outcome, but including some other activities and a range of assessments in your interview process will help you.
So the standard classroom teacher, what would you do? How would you move away from a traditional interview observation? What other things would you do?
Okay. So interaction with students
Yep.
in some form, asking them maybe some very different questions, rather than what would you do if you did that, something about your experience, maybe questions that relate to something completely outside the classroom but actually give you evidence and information about that teacher's attitude is a helpful thing to do.
And Michael?
I would say, while it may look like a traditional interview programme, candidates have been informally assessed throughout the day when they're around the school, when they're around children, how they react to different situations. And I'll come back, particularly for the younger colleagues on main scale, starting their careers, go back to the person spec. If I see a candidate, and they may not interview well, but if I've seen that they do bar work, or they're a waitress or a waiter, on their person spec, on their profile, my eyes light up, because I know they'll have people skills.
Yeah, no, it's very true. So thank you. So I'm going to wrap up our webinar for viewers. I'm just going to summarise our discussions. Again, you can follow the conversation on Twitter and Facebook at #TalkingSchoolJobs. I'm just going to say thank you to my panel members. So to conclude, you know, we were predicting size and times of seasonal rushes, you know, having that all year kind of approach. Looking at how we can use technology better, thinking of growing your own talent pool, using social media. You know, we know that's for free, so you know, if you're out there and you haven't quite got you've got your website and you're looking to enhance that, that's there for the taking. And then we talked about standing out from the crowd. Every school pretty much wants the same things, the vision and values, but how could you entice a certain teacher to come and work in your school, wherever you are located? So I hope you found the webinar useful. There'll be an on-demand version of the webcast available on eTeach website next week. We'll also have this later in the month and a guide precise to this topic. So look out for both on the website, eteach.com, or drop an email to pressoffice@eteach.com, and they'll make sure you get both items available. So thank you to our panel. Thank you very much. Thank you to you for watching. My name is Ross Vigil, I'm your host, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Done? Great, well done.
Thank you. Well done.
Oh, quite hard, isn't it?
It is quite hard,
Thinking
yeah.
on your feet all the time.
1 minute early.
Thank you, chaps.
Good.
Well done.
Right, now enjoyed it.